All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Josh here from Your Best Life Academy. And today we're going to be talking about contract law. So, for a lot of you, this is a continuation when we're talking about general insurance, or it can also be considered Chapter 2, because this section is all dedicated to understanding how contracts work. The biggest concern or the common factor that I see with a lot of people that are having trouble with this exam is they don't always 100% understand what the question is asking them. Especially because sometimes there's just that one word that throws off the entire question. So this section is mainly dedicated towards hopefully understanding that terminology. So for that reason, we highly recommend for you to watch this multiple times if you need to, and don't be afraid to rewind a certain definition. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. So the first one. First one's application. By the way, these white words that you see here, they're important obviously because I'm going to go over them, but they're not as important as some of these yellow or these red ones that you're going to be seeing. So I'll be sure to let you know on those, okay? Application, what is that? It's that form that you fill out when you want to get insurance, okay? Now there's riders. So what are riders? Riders are pretty much add-ons. So riders applies to any different type of policy. Doesn't matter what type of insurance you have or even what company you have. There's a lot of times where there's a special benefit maybe that you want on your policy that's not offered. Well, guess what? You can add it onto your policy. It's just going to cost a little bit extra, and that is known as a rider. It's an add-on benefit, an add-on provision. And we're actually going to dedicate a full video to the most common riders that you're going to see throughout your exam. Okay, so be sure to be on the lookout for that one. The next word, premium. Now, we all know what premium means. We know premium means payment. But how do we calculate that payment? The way that we calculate the payment is we take the rate, whatever the company's going to charge you based on you, because everybody's rate is different based on a bunch of little things that we actually already talked about in the chapter one of that first video a little bit, but we're actually going to talk more into detail when we talk about chapter three, which is life insurance basics. So you get that rate, you multiply it by the units of insurance, and that's what's going to give you your premium. Now, very rarely do they talk about earned and unearned premium, but just in case they talk about it in your exam, I don't want you to be thrown off by the question. So, earned premium is money that the company earned. What do you mean by that? Well, you gave your payment and they told you they were going to cover you. And then they did cover you, or they covered you, or they were willing to pay within the next 30 days because you prepaid for 30 days, a monthly payment. So they earned their money because if something did happen, they were going to pay out. Or if something did happen, they paid out. So they earned their money. That's called earned premium. Unearned premium is more used when a person pays ahead of time. Maybe some people like to have an annual policy. They just want to give one payment and not worry about it for the rest of the year. Well, guess what? Let's say you have a life insurance policy and you pay for it annually, you pay it once a year, you pay the policy, and then God forbid, 3 months later you pass away. Well, you paid for 12 months, but you only technically needed it for 3 months. What about those other 9 months? Well, not only is a death benefit going to be paid out to your family as long as you passed away based on what the policy does cover, but those 9 months technically are going to be also refunded to your family because that is unused premium. You prepaid in advance and you didn't need it for that long. Okay, so that's known as unearned or unused premium, and that's going to be returned to the family. Once you go through that process, if you qualify, well, then you get an insurance policy. You get that contract showing proof that you're covered with a specific company. Now let's move on to tort. So this is where we start getting into the whole real terminology when it comes to contracts. It's a private or civil wrong where legal action may be taken. So something basically occurs, there's a disagreement, and now most likely this is an easier word to know is you're basically going to sue somebody. So this can happen one of two ways. It can either be due to intentional tort or unintentional tort. So intentional tort is breach of contract. So the company said they were going to cover you for a specific accident or event. That event or accident happens, and now they say they're not going to cover you. They just breached the contract. So now you can sue them or you can take legal action about that. Unintentional tort is more because of negligence. You had let them know, hey, be on the lookout for this. I told you this, and they didn't pay attention to it. They weren't aware. Now they're trying to push off the blame to somebody else. You can still take legal action. Okay, that's unintentional tort. Now these next words, there's gonna be three words that I'm gonna get into right now that they all kind of mean the same thing. And this is a big, I know, frustrating fact for a lot of us when we were studying. I don't understand why they always have to have a bunch of words that kind of mean the same thing. Or sometimes they have one word that has multiple definitions or a lot of definitions for the same word. So these are what these next three are going to be, okay? So let's talk about rescission or rescinding. Okay. So when you see the word rescission or the word rescind, that pretty much means that they're going to cancel the policy. They're going to revoke the contract due to certain lies, material misrepresentation, concealment, breach of warranty, which we're actually going to talk about in a little bit more in this video, about more into detail about those words. But rescind usually happens is because the company decides to cancel a policy on you. They find out either that you lied on your application or through your medical history. So when the company decides to cancel a policy or terminate, revoke, whatever word you want to use, they call that rescinding. Now, when you want to cancel a policy and you call the company and you want to cancel, terminate, revoke, whatever you want to say, that's known as cancellation. You're kind of calling it in and canceling the policy. Here's the third one, and probably the most important one to know. Okay, that's why it's even in gold. Lapsing. Lapsing, you guessed it, means canceling a policy. But the specific way is because it's due to lack of payment. When you don't make your payment and the policy cancels, the proper phrase is lapse. So these three words all mean the same thing to do with canceling. Rescinding is the company canceling on you because they found out some information that they didn't like. Cancellation is you canceling on the company. And then lapsing is because the policy canceled because the payments weren't done. Now, I'm going to give you a sneak peek into the whole riders that I was talking about. There's a very popular provision or benefit known as grace period, and it actually comes into effect before a policy lapses. So this benefit, it helps so that your policy doesn't lapse. So let's say you miss a payment. You didn't make a payment. Well, guess what? Even though you missed your payment, you're still covered for 30 days. That is known as the grace period. Now, be sure to check on your state because sometimes grace periods may be a bit different. But for the most part, it's usually 30 days, the grace period, where even though you didn't make your payment, the company's still willing to pay the full benefit to your family if you pass away within those 30 days. They're just going to make sure that they deduct that premium that you owed them. Okay? So that grace period allows the policy to stay intact. After the grace period ends, then the policy will lapse. It's going to cancel due to lack of payment. All right? So let's continue on with some more vocabulary words. Let's talk about representation. So representation are statements that are believed to be true. They can also be known as implied warranties. See, everything that you say on an application is considered to be a representation. It's believed to be true. Now, on the flip side, we have warranties. Warranties are guaranteed truths or absolute truths. So let me give you an example. If I were to say, I'm very handsome. Now, that's a representation because the reality is just my mom and I believe that, okay? It's something that's believed to be true. Doesn't mean that it is, but it's believed to be true. Now, a warranty would be if I say my name is Joshua Zermita. Why? Because I can show you birth certificates, I can show you social security number, ID, I can show you a bunch of things that have my name. So that's why it's considered a guaranteed truth or an absolute truth. So remember that difference. Something that's believed to be true is a representation, but something that is true is considered a warranty. So let's talk about the opposite. And just like before, I have three words that have a very similar meaning. So at the end, I hope I'm able to simplify it and we're able to see the keywords. So let's jump into the first one. The first one is misrepresentation. So what's a misrepresentation? It's considered an untrue statement, basically a lie. So when you lie on the application, That's a misrepresentation. Then we have the word material misrepresentation. Notice, folks, it's in gold, so it is important. A material misrepresentation is when a lie is so severe, it will actually cause the company to change their underwriting process. So, again, at the end, I'll be able to kind of go more into detail. And the next word that has a similar definition is the word concealment. It's when you're intentionally withholding material information or facts. That's such an important word. So let's break it down. Basically, a misrepresentation is going to be like a little white lie. Like if you lie about your weight on an application, you lie about your height, you give yourself an extra 1 or 2 inches, you shave off 10, 15 pounds. That's a little small white lie. That's a misrepresentation because you lied to them at the end of the day. Material misrepresentation and concealment, they're very similar and we got to be very careful with them, okay? So they're usually going to use that phrase, okay? If it's discovered, it will alter the underwriting decision. That's the key phrase for material misrepresentation. So let's say you told them you don't have any illness and they're about to accept you as a client or they accepted you as a client and then they find out, hey, wait, this person does have a bunch of medical issues or medical conditions. They can now rescind the contract. Remember, like we talked about earlier, they can cancel it. Why? Because they find out you lied to them. So that's material misrepresentation. Concealment, coming from the word to conceal or to hide, it means you're intentionally withholding information. So if you know you have a medical condition and they ask you about it and you just kind of don't answer, you kind of brush it off. You're like, yeah, but it's not too much to worry about. You don't want to give them that information. Remember, it's weird because they use that word material facts, material information. So a lot of the time when they see the word material, people think that the answer is going to be material misrepresentation because they both have that same word in common. And that's not the case. Okay? If they're using the word withholding material information, material facts, the answer now becomes concealment. So I know it's a bit tricky, but if you keep practicing and working hard on it, it's gonna make sense, I promise. Okay? And if it didn't, feel free to play back this little section right here. Another word, fraud. Fraud also has to do with lying, but it's when you lie for a financial gain. Okay? That is considered fraud. And the last word here, materiality. Ooh, I'm glad I said that one the first time. Materiality. So materiality is basically that all parties of the contract are open to all the material information. You're basically giving the company permission to look at, let's say if you're applying for life insurance, giving them permission to look at your DMV records, your driving records, your medical history, all this information that they want, all this material information. And at the same time, you're able to look up companies as well. Look at their track record, how their statistics, their finances. You're able to look at all those things. So materiality is on the basis that both people that are entering a contract can basically look up the other person. You're giving them permission to be able to do that. So that's it when it comes to terminology. Let's jump into some concepts that have to do with contracts. So this first one are called elements of all contracts, meaning doesn't matter what kind of contract it is, whether it's insurance, whether it's a record deal to become a singer or dancer, whatever it may be, doesn't matter. All contracts in this world have to have these four different things. Okay? These four different elements in order to be considered a contract. So not one or the other, they need to have all four of them. So let's jump into the first one. The first one is an agreement. Of course, there has to be an understanding, an agreement between two parties. So that's broken up into two things. We have offer and we have acceptance. Okay, offer and then acceptance. So the offer, a lot of people get these confused because they feel the offer is done by a company. The company is trying to offer you something and then you want to accept it. But that's not the case. Okay, in this exam, it's going to be a little bit different. An offer is actually done by the proposed insured or the applicant. The offer is that you're submitting an application along with an initial premium, that first month's payment. that is considered an offer. You're basically offering yourself to be part of the company. If the company decides to accept you, guess what? They're going to issue a policy. So remember, that agreement is up of those two parts. That offer that you do yourself because you want to become a client, and that acceptance means the company accepts you and they're going to issue out that policy. So that's the first element. There needs to be an agreement. Number two, there needs to be consideration. Okay. So this is one of the more ones that they love to ask about in questions because consideration has two different definitions. And we're going to talk more about that in another video. But for this exam, when we're talking specifically about contracts, consideration is the company's promise to pay. They're giving you their word. If something happens, we're going to cover you. That is known as consideration. A lot of people think that consideration means, well, let me think about it. And that's not the case, folks. Consideration is a company's promise to pay the benefit or to cover you, whatever it may be. Okay? The third thing that every contract needs to have is a competent parties. Not a, I'm sorry, they need to have competent parties on both sides. What are competent parties? Well, the word competent means you understand. Okay, so there's a little funny acronym for that, and that is considered, that's called no mimi. Okay, so people that are mimi are not able to sign contracts. Who are mimi? Okay, mimi is minors. So people that are under the legal age are not really allowed to sign any type of contract because they're underage. They may not fully understand exactly what they're signing. Second one, intoxicated. People that are under the influence of anything, drugs or alcohol. If they signed a document, if they can prove they were intoxicated, guess what? That contract doesn't hold up in court. It's void. And the last one, people that are mentally impaired. Maybe they're not all there, unfortunately, mentally. Well, those types of people are not able to sign contracts either. Okay, so as long as they are not part of these three types of people, minors, intoxicated, or mentally impaired, they're able to sign a contract. Okay, and the last one, the most obvious one, legal purpose. So, what does that mean? You're forming a contract for legal reasons. I cannot have somebody sign a contract to, let's say, become a hit person, a hitman, a hit woman, to take somebody out, and they decide to back out. I can't sue them. Why? Because we formed a contract for illegal reasons. Okay. It always has to be for legal reasons that you're filling out the contract. So, now that we're done with the elements that every single contract needs to have, let's talk about the different characteristics of a contract. These are the most common contracts that you'll see on your exam. And I'm really going to break these down, folks. So hopefully this helps out. Aleatory. So, what's an aleatory contract? An aleatory contract is an uneven exchange. Remember that phrase. It's an uneven exchange. So, the best example of an aleatory contract is a life insurance policy. So let's say, for example, your annual premium for a life insurance policy is $600, meaning you're paying $550 a month, not 550. You're paying $50 a month for your life insurance. At the end of the year, you would have given the company $600. But let's say that company gave you a policy of $150,000. So God forbid at the end of the year you pass away, out of your pocket, you gave the company $600 and they gave your family or your beneficiary 150,000. Was that a fair exchange? Absolutely not. That was an uneven exchange. Or the proper name for that is that was an aleatory contract because it was an uneven exchange. Okay? Next one, adhesion. Also very popular when it comes up on your exam. An adhesion contract is known as take it or leave it. There is no counter offer. Either you take it or you leave it. Another common phrase that's used with this when you see it on your test is the word ambiguity. Ambiguity is just a fancy way of saying the customer is always right. Meaning, if you end up having tort, like we talked about earlier, you have a disagreement legally and you wanna sue them pretty much, you're going to win the case. That's pretty much what it means. Ambiguity means you have a higher chance of winning that argument. Why? Because you had no say in writing the contract, because it was a take it or leave it contract. There was no counter offer. So the best example I can give you for this type of contract is any type of app that you download on your smartphone. Think about it. When you download an app, does it ask you to accept the terms and conditions? I mean, all the time, right? And if you don't accept the terms and conditions, if you say, I don't want to accept them, can you use the app? No, you can't. The only way that you can use that app is if you accept the terms and conditions. That is known as adhesion contract. Why? Because it was take it or leave it. Either you agree or you can't use it type of deal. So that's when it comes to adhesion. The next one, condition, a conditional contract. So this one's fairly simple. A conditional contract is commonly referred to as if and then. So if you do this, then I will do that. That is conditional. So this kind of falls into almost any kind of contract. All contracts to a certain degree are considered conditional. Why? Because if you make your payment, then they will cover you. If you don't make your payment, guess what? Then we will not cover you. So that one's pretty self-explanatory. Conditional refers to if and then. Here's another one that's also popular. Unilateral. So the word unilateral, if we look at the first three letters, meaning uni, it refers to one, the Latin word for one. Like unicorn, united, union, it all refers to one. So remember that one part, okay? Only one party makes a legally enforceable promise. What does that mean? I think the best example for this one is auto insurance. At least here in California, right? When it comes to auto insurance, you're not required to have to stick to a certain company. At any moment, you can switch companies, right? So if you decide to switch companies, are they going to be calling you and say, "Hey, why'd you leave us? What's going on? What happened?" No, they don't care. You moved on to another company, great. They're covering you. They're just going to stop covering you. Let's say you stop making payments. Are they going to try to send you collections or try to get the money? Maybe once or twice, but after that, they don't really care. Why? Because they're going to stop the coverage. They're not going to continue to be covering you. So, how is that the only one party is making a legally enforceable promise? Well, in the event if there was an auto accident, guess what? They have to pay, right? They always have to pay. If they were covering you and there was that accident and it falls under their terms, of course they're going to have to pay that accident. But you're under no contract to pay them every single month because you can leave whenever you want. You can change companies whenever you want, and they're not going to go after you. So that is known as a unilateral contract, when only one part of the parties make a legally enforceable promise. And the last one, when it comes to these characteristics, also very self explanatory, it's personal, a personal contract. Well, guess what? It's made just for you. You can't, it's non transferable. You can't pass on this contract to somebody else. So thanks for hanging in there. Here's the last part. Okay, this is it to wrap it up. The 6 specifications for insurance policies. All right. And I'm going to give you the simplified form. Okay. Usually, if you get a question about this, this is almost always going to be the answer 99.9% of the time. If you're going to get a question about this section, here is the answer that you need to remember. The financial rating of an insurer is not required. Okay? So these 6 specifications that I'm talking about, that means they have to be included on every contract. All 6 of these things. Any type of insurance contract, they have to be included. Well, guess what? Usually they're going to give you in a multiple choice question, and 3 of them are going to be here on the ones I'm going to show you. But that final answer, that fourth one, is going to show the financial rating. Guess what? The financial rating of a company is not required. Can it be there? Yes, but it's not required. Okay, so always remember that. Here are the 6 things that every insurance policy needs to have. Number 1, the parties to the contract. Of course, you need to know who's covering you, what company you have insurance with, and you need to know who they're covering. So they need to know your name, right? So, of course, every party in the contract has to be listed. Number 2, the person or the property being insured. Because you can buy insurance on yourself, you can buy it on a car, You could buy it on a home. So whatever you're purchasing on, whether it's a person or property, you need to know what exactly is going to be covered. A statement of insurable interest. So we talked about this in our first video, part one of chapter one. Okay, knowing how insurable interest works. So be sure to watch that video if you don't know what it is. That phrase, insurable interest, is important to know for your exam because sometimes it can cost you 3 questions just by you not knowing what that word means. Okay. Number four, the risk insured against. So what it covers you, obviously there's sometimes some exclusions, some things that companies are not going to cover you. So you need to know what they will cover you for. Okay, so that always needs to be included in the contract. The time period in which the policy will be enforced. Well, if you pay for your policy monthly, well, guess what? You're going to know it's enforced for the month. If you get, let's say, a term insurance policy, when we're talking about life insurance policies, well, if you got a 20-year term, you know that contract is good for 20 years. If you get an auto insurance policy for the year, guess what? You know it's good for 12 months. So that's the time period that they're talking about. And the last thing that they need is the stated premium mode. We're actually going to talk about that in our next video, life insurance basics. But the premium mode, it basically means the frequency of payments. Are you paying for your policy monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually? Okay, you need to know how much the amount of money you have to pay every month and how often you're going to be making that payment. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you found it helpful. Please consider liking and subscribing so that we can continue to be bringing out free content to you, as well as feel free to follow us on our social media platforms that are in the description down below. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you continue to live your best life.